I feel like I took the lead on Eternals, and myself and Jack have also mirrored each other in what we've played this week. So, Jack, without further ado, you take the lead.
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, yeah, you're asking me to take the lead, but I was going to ask you, and I've seen a lot of dodgy stuff kind of on Twitter about bugs and weird things and bits and pieces in the GTA remaster games. I actually haven't hit on anything massively egregious yet. And I played a little Vice City and a little San Andreas, and I'm probably more likely to continue with San Andreas. In fact, I thought Vice City, running on a PS5, it seems like they've gone really bold on the colours and made it just look brighter and richer and nicer. And I haven't had anything bad really to say so far. How about you?
So I think the best way to sum up my positive things to say about the definitive collection experience is something Barry said on a stream last night. Good friend of the show, Barry Murphy. Follow him, twitch.tv superstar. He said that if what you're looking for is something that very authentically resembles GTA San Andreas but has more modern control scheme to a fault, that is what you've gotten.
Yeah.
It is, I may have seemed like a pessimist the week we talked about this game coming out, and I said I feel like this is just going to be a barely more than a polish, and that is what it is. Some things have been retextured. There's a new light engine. I'll talk about that more in a while. But nuts and bolts. The best praise I can give it is that it is it is cool to see that game, such as it is, run at 60 FPS. Stably. And there is a performance mode over picture mode and stuff like that. So that is cool, and with the rose tinted glasses on for how much we love those games when they came out, that's a cool experience. But even though I haven't, it seems like most of the really bad bugs in terms of weather effects and stuff like that I've seen are associated with either the PC versions, more of which we'll talk about in the news, or specifically GTA 3, which none of us have touched yet. So I can't really speak to how buggy things are or aren't. Any bugs I have encountered so far are the same kinds of ones that would have been present on the PS2. Like sometimes when, a car crashes and it explodes and disappears, sometimes you'll have individual bits of the car still floating there in midair, like a bumper just floating there suspended in midair, that kind of thing. Nothing necessarily game breaking. What I will say is that some of the retextures are wanting or slapdash at best. They have somehow increased the resolution yet worsened the animation on a bunch of characters, so there are recognizable characters in the game that look completely different and worse, even though it is in a much higher resolution than they did in the original version of the game.
I think the main characters though do look better. Would you say that?
Yeah, some of them. I do find it funny that of CJ's gang, he is the one that looks the worst and jankiest. The rest of them look pretty damn good, but he's it looks like he's coming in from a slightly different game from a couple of years beforehand. And I suppose San Andreas was always going to be the one of the three that held up the best because it was made last. But still, it's very much, it's just a really, really polished PS2 game, The light engine I have much more problem with. I think in broad daylight with no other weather effects, it looks pretty damn good. But I think when the new dynamic lighting stuff comes in, there's
just to confirm, you're playing this on the Series S, right?
Series S, yeah. So early doors, you have your kind of confrontation with Officer Tenpenny, Samuel L. Jackson's character, and the way the new dynamic lighting backlights some of these characters is like I literally could not see his face. You know, because it's like the light is more directional and things like that. It's kind of the sun is setting behind him. And like I should be able to see his face moving, but it just looks like a blank space, you know. And that I have noticed that happening at different times of day on this new engine. So I'm loving it when it's broad daylight, but when it's not, it's a little bit more kind of you start to see the seams and things like that. But it is quite reminiscent in a lot of ways of when that Super Mario Collection came out early in the year, that it is very much is like we have done the bare minimum to make this, you know, we've like polished it a little, we've tweaked the controls a little, and that's your lot. So I think some people go on, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say, from what I understand, like graphically, I've been looking around, and from what I've seen or read, is that it was a basic like upscaling, but then they've kind of gone in and manually touched up like bits and pieces here and there. And from what it just sounds like is that second bit, there are elements of truth to that, and there are elements of, well, they clearly didn't do a good enough job.
No, because like I suppose the foundational problem with it is that like even when you go in and retexture things, these are still like PS2 assets. So all the characters are a little too blocky for new 2021 textures to look real good. All the characters are a little weirdly proportioned and kind of look like balloon animals. But that's just the way games were made back then. And again, it's one of those things that depending on what you're prettying up, depending on what you're shining and what you're remastering, in some ways, you know, like I said, it gives the game quality of life. It makes it very playable, but it does help show the cracks and show the age of the game. More so than maybe some people were expecting. And I think if you don't have a heavy degree of nostalgia for all these games, all three of them, you are going to feel a bit ripped off if you paid that money for those three games that they have done fuck all to. That's just how I feel about it. Other people might feel differently. And I suppose what helps me not being more mad about how little work they did is the fact that I haven't paid any money for it because San Andreas is on Game Pass. But the way, like, I thought what was going to happen was I was going to get a sniff at San Andreas and be, like, so back into that world that by the end of this weekend I was going to end up buying the trilogy. But the opening couple of hours in San Andreas has made me go, do you know what? I'll wait. I don't really like, because if this is, you know, if this is how little work was done to San Andreas, I'm not as much as I love Vice City. I'm not as like, you know, if Vice City, if people were saying this is like a visual knockout, this is like incredible, I'd be like, oh yeah, well jealous that I'm not playing that yet. But it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case.
Me. Like, I think Vice City looks really
nice.
I
mean, again, it looks better, but do I think it's going to look do I think it's going to be any more of an upgrade than San Andreas is for me so far? No. It's just that it's a game where the location benefits more from that new light engine. Because it does have those different hues.
Yeah. I think,
but other than that,
really
it's
nice.
like... Yeah, other than that, like, again, you know, just to sum it up, like, it feels like scarcely more than a lick of paint.
So, can I say some things I like about it?
Yeah. I feel like I'm coming in just with the fucking shovel this week, lads, and burying everything. Like, I'm usually Joe Positive.
Oh,
yeah, I'm usually Joe Positive with the stuff I'm playing. Yeah.
Okay, so some things I like. I feel like the controls feel a lot snappier than the original PS2 games. I thought going back I wasn't going to like the combat, but I think, from what I played of San Andreas and a little bit of Vice City, like the guns feel like they lock on, the targeting system feels improved. It has a bit more of a GTA, like a later GTA 4, GTA 5 feel to the control scheme. I think they've put in effort on that, and it feels better to play. I like the fact that you can select your weapons from a wheel now, and the radio stations from a wheel. Like they've done little cool graphical things for the weapons and the radio stations, where before, if you wanted to switch around, you were just flipping round and round until you got to the selection that you wanted, whether it was weapons or a radio station or whatever. And now you can just boom, open the wheel up, and that's like a nice little modern thing that they've added. Like the waypointing and the suggested place locations and stuff feel a lot it's a lot easier to navigate and a lot easier to manage, and it gives you routing like it does in Grand Theft Auto 4 when it did that for the first time, which I like. I think the ability to not only have better checkpoints in the missions, because I don't know if you remember, especially Vice City, frustrating the living shit out of me, getting way deep into a mission, and then, I don't know, something exploding near one of the characters I was meant to be doing it with, and then me failing the mission and having to start the mission over again would drive me insane. And I think the checkpointing is better on them, and the fact that you can retry a mission as well. So, like, if you fail a mission halfway across the map, in the original Grand Theft Auto games, tough break, motherfucker. You got to go all the way back across the map to start your mission again, and they have the ability to now restart that, and I think that is better. But generally, I didn't have too much issue with the lighting. I was just playing it on my PS5, on like a HD TV and stuff. I think the games look better. I knew the games weren't going to look like insane graphical fidelity, like coming off, Guardians of the Galaxy to this is like a drop off of epic proportions. But these have got some age on them. Like I remember playing these when I was in secondary school, so that like really ages how old they are. And I guess I wasn't really expecting too much. I don't know, Dave, in terms of what your expectations were, like what would have swayed it for you to feel a bit better, because obviously like you kind of ripped apart some of the visuals and stuff. Like,
yeah, no, I don't think they could have. I think this is always what I was going to think of it, because this is always what I expected.
Yeah.
It wasn't like it fell below expectations. I just thought this was going to be, they announced it a month before it came out. It had relatively little fanfare. Everything stunk from a mile off of just like when they just dropped them on PS4. Except they've done a bit more work this time, obviously. It was just going to be a little coat of paint. I'm not necessarily, that's not me either advocating for they needed to do full remakes or anything like that. I just think that, look, it's nice and it's nifty to be able to play these games in the big widescreen format at such a high frame rate. That's cool. But I'm kind of just saying that, like, it very much, it just, I don't know whether it makes me feel very old seeing the cracks in this game.
Do you have
is this game my portrait of Dorian Gray? Who's to say?
Do you have the cynical view that Rockstar had the embargo at the same time the game was released because of these issues, or do you think they just didn't give a shit because it's Rockstar and it's GTA and it will sell, regardless?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is probably a mix of both, isn't it?
Probably.
Because I can also see the thing where, like, even if it's buggy, they don't give a shit. They're Rockstar. People will still buy it, so maybe to some level they didn't care when the embargo was. They don't necessarily need an early embargo to generate PR to sell a game. No. They also don't need. They also don't need to worry about negative reviews tanking a game's sales. Like, Rockstar games are fairly review proof in that way. So I don't know, it feels like maybe it was an afterthought. Maybe it's one of those cynical things where it's like, well, obviously there may, like, who knows if there'll ever be another Red Dead. We are probably multiple years away from another Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, GTA Online is making bank, but maybe for our financials we need to release some sort of actual physical game this year. That's kind of what it feels like. It's like, let's dig through the chest and hit one of the buttons.
It would have been really interesting if the game had been released on Steam, how that would have fared in terms of like review bombs and stuff, because obviously there's no way to as a community to go on the PlayStation Store or the Xbox Store and review this game with a like or a dislike. So it would have been interesting if it had been on Steam, how it would have fared there. And obviously we'll get into the news about the issues that the PC version does have. But it's been interesting. I saw a GIF of the rain in San Andreas, which
it was not in 3. Where it looks like the raindrops are following the car along.
It kind of looks like that, and it kind of looks like, you remember the rain in Gears of War? The was it like Razor Rain or something like that? Which was rain that could kill you if you was underneath it. It kind of reminded me of that. So I mean, for me, like I have San Andreas downloaded. I've not had a chance to play it yet. I would imagine with any of these things, like, it's a couple of issues that have been noted that have been blown up to 11, because everything does get blown up to 11 on the internet these days. But I still think it's fair to expect that when you have the legacy that these games have, that this trilogy would come out and just run. And obviously there are all of the quality of life features that Jack have mentioned that I'm glad that they're there, but just on a visual aspect. And I asked the question earlier today on Twitter, I was like, what was worse in terms of release, this or the Mario All-Stars trilogy? Because there are some similar complaints about, the overall feeling is just like, why bother with this other than to make as much money as possible? It's like they feel
You've answered
like
your own question there.
They just feel like half-assed remasters,
Because
that's been a worrying trend.
Yeah, let's not dance around it. Like, Rockstar have the more than enough in terms of money and resources that they could have done a really fucking good job on this if they wanted to.
Of course, absolutely.
And at the end of the day, it ultimately comes down to they didn't want to. And that's really all it is. And you say you have it downloaded and you haven't touched it yet. Like, you will have fun with it. Do you know what I mean? And it's. I think a lot of it is down to, like, I am really trying to divorce myself from nostalgia when I talk realistically about this game, and that is very hard to do because there are few video game franchises in my life that are such a time capsule for me as these 3 GTA games. But I'm trying to be realistic about it, and it is, you'll have fun with it, but you'll also you'll keenly, especially now that, like, as you say, you're doing more 3D environment design and things like that, like, you're gonna see the shit. You know what I mean? You're gonna see, it's like, wow, a lot of these buildings are just squares.
The draw distance is way better though, right? That is one thing that we can agree on.
Yeah, of course, but that should be expected at this point.
Yeah, like that is like, damning with faint praise kind of thing. It's like,
I was just trying to think of like something else, because I feel like I'm trying to balance out, because I had a good time with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying I had a bad time with it. Like, I'm having a good time with it, but, I'm trying to take off the teenager playing through these games for an unreal amount of hours hat and put on the, like, I'm on a podcast trying to earnestly review this thing. But I'll tell you what, Jack, let's end this segment with some positivity. And
I would just say before that, the one last thing
before we get positive,
I will be really curious when Digital Foundry do their breakdown on it, because I'll be really interested to see what they say about the Switch version.
The Switch version is apparently a fucking mess.
Yeah, which, I mean, that doesn't come as a surprise to anyone. No. But I'm just, I try not to get too bogged down in the technical aspects of these games and stuff. But I'll be really curious to see, like, the disparity between the Switch version and the other versions.
As one thing I will say, if I want to end the GTA thing on a positive note, is like that frame rate when you put it on performance mode is fucking buttery smooth.
Yeah.
Like, and that's one thing, again, Barry said in his stream last night, much as we love GTA San Andreas, the frame rate on that was not buttery smooth back in the day by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
So there is
but there was no way it could be. So Yeah.
Jack.
Anyway.